So I'm WOUTER JANSEN. I run a company called Square Eyes, which is a distribution company. And we help filmmakers get their films out into the world. We work with a lot of short films, and I think in that field it's more like kind of talent development, really trying to introduce new filmmakers to the film industry, what we do. The catalog of Square Eyes is really, I started this company by myself, so it's really my taste, I think. And even though it's distribution, we really approach it from quite an artistic perspective, I think. So my taste is also more festival oriented. So it's really films that I like, which are more challenging films often. And then it's of course, because we don't work with a lot of films, we work with around 10 to 15 shorts per year. So we really try to have a balanced catalog, so that we have some diversity in that. And we scout films throughout the year. So we're always looking for, maybe we see a film that we really like and then we keep in touch with the director for the upcoming projects. Or we're looking at the big festivals, what they are showing. And we're scouting at markets. So for instance here, also the pitch that is happening on Saturday, we for instance look for new projects. So we're always kind of on the lookout for filmmakers that we don't know or projects from filmmakers that we already work with, to see if we could work with them again. Yeah.
Exclusive.
I think this cruise is exactly the adventure this family needed.
The films that we work with, we only work with films that haven't premiered yet. Just also so that I don't stress out my colleagues with having to catch up on everything. So it's really, we try to be involved as early as possible, but also because we work with a bit more creative films, like films that are outspoken in the approach to like story or aesthetics. It's usually in the edit process that they really kind of find their form. So we're often following projects, but we really come on board kind of around the moment that they have a edit in place and then up until the world premiere. And we're always following projects, but then it's always the question if we end up getting on board with the project in the end. Yeah. I think for me, there's not a big difference between fiction and animation films. I think maybe it's also interesting for our company that we really try to broaden the approach. So if we work with animation, that we're also really looking at fiction festivals, documentary festivals. So we've had films premiere at like bigger festivals that are not animation focused. I think the biggest difference that I notice is that animation festivals are not really interested in films that are very quickly too long for animation festivals. So we have a couple of animations that are around 15 minutes and that's really considered too long for animation festivals. So we notice that those films maybe play more outside of animation festivals than in the animation festivals. And besides that, with animations, you just have more chance. And if you then have an animated documentary, you can also, again, go into that field. So it's really, we try to kind of reach as broad as an audience and really also outside of the animation space as possible. So the program that we had on Sunday, I think kind of shows the diversity of our catalog. So a lot of the films that were in the program are kind of in between different forms. So we had a couple of, like for instance, Ardent Order is a French film, which is like an animated documentary about the burning of the Notre Dame and people looking at it. Then, for instance, we had A Course, which is a more classical animation. It's a Swiss film by Samuel Paty and Sylvain Monet. Samuel's new film, Sans Voir, also played at the opening. And they did a residency in a retirement home and were there for a year doing sound recordings, doing sketches, and then that evolved into a film. So it's again like kind of in between documentary and animation. And then, for instance, the last film in the program, that's our most recent one from Nicolas Gabbe, The Sunset Special 2, and that's kind of like an internet influenced, chaotic, crazy, experimental animation about cruise ships. So I think all of those kind of touch upon like what we're interested in. And then like one of my favorites that's in there is Noir Soleil from Marie Larrivée, and that's one of those too long for animation festivals type of film. And also a lot of people said, why is this not just a live action film? Because the writing is very much kind of live action oriented, but I think that's the most interesting part of that film, is that it feels very like classical narrative in a way. So I think it's kind of the broad scope of what we're interested in when it comes to the animation films. When I think of the do's and don'ts of like festival distribution, I think the most important thing is that you don't need somebody like me. You really can do it yourself. I feel that short film is still super democratic. Like programmers don't really care about who you are, if you have a distributor, if you're connected. So they really just look at the film and consider it on the basis of that. Also, I wouldn't stress too much about making mistakes. I know a lot of friends that had a film that was super successful, but they did everything wrong. And then they could use that experience again for their next film to do it better. Like thinking about your world premiere, your international premiere, when to show it first. It's not that important. We have films that premiere at a very small festival, and maybe half a year in the run, we suddenly have like a very big festival that selects the film. So I wouldn't stress too much and really just use the experience kind of along the way. And you never know which festival can be important for you. Maybe you go to Animateka and you meet the programmer of a very big festival that then follows you for your next film. So it's really, you never really know at what point you make the right connections, I think. Nowadays, the most important thing is kind of figuring out what festivals are good and which are not, because there's so many festivals, like there's 12,000 festivals or something, and all of them ask money nowadays to get into them. So I think making those decisions is the most difficult. What I would always recommend is just to copy other films. So if you have seen another film that you think is somewhat similar to yours, just see what that film did, where it played, and just use that as your starting point for what you can do with your film.